In this step we're going to build a landing gear. Here's all the parts you'll need to do that. Includes all the strut and skid parts plus the mounts and the canopy mount, which you'll see where that goes a little bit later. For each of the 4 skid mounts, you're going to push in 2 of the lock nuts into these recesses, which is actually going to be on the back, and then you're going to slightly thread in an M2 set screw into the boss on the side. This will be on the outside. You just want to thread this in a couple of threads. You definitely do not want it protruding on the inside, because later we're going to need to push the skids through this and it'll scratch them up, or they won't go at all if you don't do that. The 2 front struts are the more narrow of the struts. They're singular. There's no doublers that go on them. They're just going to be single pieces of graphite. You'll see that's going to be different on the rear struts. You're going to build the rear struts by combining the wider outer strut with the triangular, sort of triangular shaped doubler, if you will. Pay attention, these things are directional. They'll really only go together one way properly with all the holes aligned. They go together with an 8mm bolt with a lock nut on the end of it. You can tighten that down, just make sure all the holes line up. And from here we're going to go ahead and put the skid mounts and the strut mounts on all 4 of these. Okay, now we can make up the actual struts. You're going to combine the skid mounts, the plastic skid mounts, and the aluminum strut mount braces. You're going to put them together with these orientations. The skid mounts, this mount with 2mm bolts that thread into the lock nuts that we put in earlier. The mount braces on the top go in with 8mm and 6mm bolts. The 6mm bolt goes in the bottom thinner side. The 8mm goes in the longer or thicker top side. If you get that wrong, the bolts will protrude further than they need to. And you want to do that for each of the 4 struts. And just note the orientation of these. It's a little bit different, than they're not all the same. Okay, here you can see the rear struts in place. They bolt into the back of the landing gear frame, motor frame, 4mm bolts. There's threaded positions for that just under the fuel tank. You're going to position them as so, canted forward. You don't want to thread lock or fully tighten these yet. We're not going to do that until we put the skids in place. Alright, the front struts are the thinner, single, non-doubled ones. They're going to be a little different in that we're going to put them on the frame, and then we're going to lay the canopy mount plate on top of that, and then that's all going to bolt in with the longer 4mm bolts. So for the front struts, you want to put them together, you want to put them onto the frame like this. The struts go on first, and then you're going to put the canopy mount plate on top of it, and then put the 2 longer 4mm bolts through that, which thread into the 4mm holes in the landing gear frame. At this point, you don't want to fully tighten these or put thread lock on them, because we're going to do that after we get the skids in. For each of the 2 skid tubes, you're going to take the 2 plastic end buttons, and you're going to push them into the end of the skid. You'll want to use CA on these, but they'll push right in, 1 on each end, 2 in each skid. So you're going to push the skids into the strut mounts. These fit pretty tight, so you're going to need to grab each strut separately, and as you push it through, work the strut or work the skid so that it will go through both of them. If you need to, you can put some lubricant on this, but you really shouldn't have to. We're going to set the position on this by the back of each skid, and I'll show you that in the next step. Once you've got the set screws in place, the struts and skids are all positioned, go back and thread lock and fully tighten these 4mm bolts so that they're good and tight, and that's going to complete the setup. So to position the skids and the struts, go to the back and measure from the back of the rear skid mount to the back of the skid plug. Should be about 1.5 inches, and you want to set both of them at that distance. Make sure the front, this curved area, is vertical straight up. It doesn't have to be, it'll just look silly if you don't do that. Once you got that set, then we can tighten up these set screws. Once you've got the skids positioned properly at the back, you can go ahead and tighten down these set screws on the side to make sure the skid can't turn in the strut mounts. You don't have to kill these, but they need to be tightened firmly up against the tubing. If you want, you can put slow CA on these. They're fairly tight. They should hold at least for a while. If you take them in and out for a while, a couple of times, you're going to need to put CA on them. Here you can see the chassis with the landing gear installed. Has the canopy mount in the front, both front and rear struts installed with the skids. So now we're going to move on to the tail boom assembly. The last thing I want to show you in this step is I found something in the assembly manual is missing, and it's the installation of this bolt in the bottom of the frame side braces. It's a 12mm bolt. You should find them in the kit. They can go in fully tightened and thread locked because the engine's already aligned at this point. They just need to be put in.